Yeah, just as soon as we have people, I think we'll do it.
Yeah.
Well, hi everyone, welcome to our live stream. So tonight, my fellow public scholars and friends, Dalia and Elsayed, Laura Domínguez, Stéfanie Tremblay, and myself, Maxine Iannuccilli, have decided to host an Ask Me Anything session on grad school and grad school life. So the goal is really truly to help, be it through answering questions or sharing some of our own personal experiences or information that we have access to as grad students. Hopefully we're going to provide you with some tips and tricks along the way, and maybe a bit of reassurance and hopefully a sense of community somewhere throughout. We encourage you all throughout the next hour or so to ask us really anything, be it about grad school in general, managing timelines, work-life balance, funding, really whatever's on your mind is fair game, just throw it in the chat. So we've each taken a very different approach or a different path to our now PhD candidacies, and we're going to do our best to provide as authentic as possible responses to your questions. We'll be using the chat function to receive questions through YouTube and the live question feature to answer them through Instagram. So all you have to do is type in your question in either platform, and we're going to do our best to moderate and get to as many questions that we can and feel comfortable with. As we wait for people to continue joining in and settling in, we thought we'd share a little bit about our own motivations maybe for doing a PhD. In the meantime, feel free to start sharing questions, and I'll get to them I'll start collecting them, and as soon as we do a little round of intros, we'll start answering your questions. So maybe Dalia, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Well, hi everyone. Thank you to whoever has joined in online. My name is Dalia. I'm doing a PhD. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Education at Concordia. And I guess, Maxine, you wanted to start us off by talking a little bit about the inspirations of why we did this. And perhaps I think one of the main motivations for me is that I do have a specific relationship with education. And I think it was a space that I wanted to continue in for a little bit. It allows me to be a little bit curious. It allows me to engage with a lot of materials that I'm not necessarily exposed to beyond that scope. And it also allows me to make connections between theoretical, spaces and worlds and actual real worlds. So that's what I love the most about doing research and about being in my PhD, is that I can actually say that I'm continuously learning because I'm in that space, but it can also be problematic because after the PhD, what comes next, right? So it's not necessarily that clear yet, but for now, this is where I'm at. So yeah.
I feel that.
I feel like someone's gonna ask that.
How about you?
Yes, I'm doing my PhD in biochemistry. I like the way I ended up doing a PhD was not because I intentionally looked for it, but rather like the opportunity was offered, and I really thought it was a good move for me at the time because I was just finishing my bachelor's in biotechnology engineering, and I knew that I wanted to continue doing something health related. So I knew I wanted to, move into the industry or academia, but I wanted to work on something health related. And I don't know why that was always one of my main passions and something that really inspired me. So this opportunity came up, and the project was really what I wanted it to be. And I also had this I want to keep learning. I want to keep looking into this and doing research on this. So I decided to accept the opportunity, and here I am.
Thanks.
Awesome. Steph. Hi, I'm Stéfanie Tremblay. I'm doing a PhD in physics. So I took a very non-linear path to get here. I was always very fascinated by the human body. I always knew I wanted to do something related to health, like Laura. But at first, because at the time I was an athlete on the national judo team, I thought I would really want to stay in that sphere, like the high performance world and sports. So I became an athletic therapist. I did the bachelor at Concordia in exercise science with specialization in athletic therapy. I did the certification. So I thought cool, I'm gonna keep working with like athletic teams and travel with them and all that. But towards the end of my bachelor, it became like I just couldn't see myself doing that anymore. I just couldn't picture it, and I think that also coincided with me like being transitioning out of the high performance world. Like I was starting to think of retiring and starting to think of, okay, yeah, it's cool to perform and all that, but is that how I want to like contribute to society, and like really asking myself those questions. So decided to continue in the same department, but doing research, very fundamental research in neurophysiology. And then a bit like Laura, I kind of fell on this opportunity of doing a PhD in physics, which is super unexpected because it was my worst topic in high school in CEGEP. But the supervisor I met was doing brain imaging with MRI, looking at the brain with this technology and like looking at people with various conditions and so on. So that's how I decided to do a PhD in medical physics. But yeah, like Dalia and Laura said, like for me, it's like I'm a very curious person. I love to be continuously learning and like all the sort of opportunities that are not directly related to research, but that doing a PhD brings your way. For example, the public scholar program, that to me is as amazing.
Well, I could definitely relate to the non-linearity of your path. I would say myself as well, not so linear. And so I dropped out of college and went into fashion and started a career in fashion design and ended up working as a stylist for a while. And then somewhere along the line, I was like, well, this isn't satisfying a purpose that I think can sustain me for a long time. So I moved into psychology and then did the bachelor's day one up till the PhD now. The reason I think I went into psychology was because I saw it as, so I'm not in clinical psychology, I'm in research psychology. And I saw it as a path towards a way to implement societal change, be it at the policy level. I didn't know yet how, but really through research, kind of having a societal impact, which now towards the end of my degree is really where I am leaning towards. And I'm now at a point where I'm actually strong transitioning out of academia into industry, be it at the government level or in private industries, to apply, to have a much more applied version of academia or of research psychology. So yeah, that's a bit about us. I guess we could go ahead and turn to questions. We don't have questions yet in the YouTube stream. If you are here and have any questions related to grad school, feel free to start putting them in the chat, and we'll get to them as we go. How about you, Letta? How's Instagram looking?
No questions yet, but type in your questions if you have any, and we'll be answering them right now.
Yeah, and even if at this point you're joining us and you're not sure what exactly to ask from your point of view, feel free to ask us about our journey, about our paths if you want to, and we'll get us started on, we'll get a discussion going, and it might inspire questions as we go.
Maybe in the meantime, we can talk a little bit about why we're doing this as a group and kind of as a collective rather than us doing it alone.
And why we're doing it in the first place.
Exactly.
I think maybe a lot of people are not really familiar with what it means to be a public scholar.
Exactly.
We can maybe introduce that.
Exactly. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because I think to me, perhaps I'll speak to the aspect of doing something like this in collaboration with other people who are, perhaps for you, Laura, and you, Stéfanie, come from completely different disciplines to the work that I do, right? There is a lot of connection between my work and your work, Maxine, but I think it kind of sheds a light on this sort of idea of a common PhD experience, which is very different it differs from one person to another, but at the same time, there's some sort of commonalities that I think we could talk about a little bit, and perhaps that's mainly our experience with the public scholars program, right? So it's something,
Yeah, I agree on the commonalities, and I think it's a good idea to touch on that. So to touch on like why I ended up as in the public scholars program in and of itself, I think related to how I speak about the applied version of my interest in towards the applied version of research, it's kind of what drew me through the program in sense of it's heavily axed on knowledge dissemination and accessibility of research and accessibility of like what we're doing as academics, getting that to people outside of academia. So in that sense, similarly, I think even sharing the experience of what it means to be a PhD student or a grad student, sharing that kind of in the same line of thought is what I think is great, is like coming together and touching on these commonalities through a thing like an AMA with you.
absolutely.
And it's so rare that we interact. Like, I think in the first 3-4 years of my PhD, I didn't interact with anyone except people from my department.
And that's even if you interact
Yeah.
with people, right?
yeah, exactly. During the pandemic, that was very limited also. So, it's a really cool thing to start to think about. That's what the public scholar really brought for me, is to, it kind of, like the fact that you have to reframe what you're doing and really think like, why does it matter? Why would someone that is like not interested in MRI, doesn't know anything about MRI, like how would I explain it to this person and convey like why it's important? And it's at first like that question is super tough, and it's like it makes you really rethink what you're doing and make you like wonder, is this important? Should I be doing something else? Like, is there gonna be any like, how would this be applied? And for me, I feel that it kind of changed like who I am as an academic person. Like it changed like how the path I took in my research, I think, because I had to ask myself these questions.
Yes, for sure. Like, I feel like on the one hand, it's very difficult sometimes for you as a researcher. You get very just very focused on your work that you forget what you're even doing it.
Right.
So in you trying to explain it to other people, like you can really understand yourself why you're doing it. Like, for example, like, I don't know, like you're working on crystallizing this protein, like, and then you work for 3 years to freaking get the structure of the protein, but then you don't even know why. Like, why do you even want to do that? Or like, how is that gonna help anyone? Or why are you even doing that? So it really helps you kind of like take a step back and realize why you're doing the work that you're doing. And then on the other hand, I feel like everything that you're working on, someone's gonna find interesting. Like, there's someone out there who's also interested in that, and I think there's a lot of value and a little bit of responsibility as well into you putting the message out there. And there, for example, like all the topics that you're researching, I think they're very, very interesting and very important that other people know. And then sometimes I feel like the information just gets lost somewhere, like in a thesis that 3 people are gonna read max. Like, and then like,
So what's your reach, really?
Yeah. I think that's super important. We do have a first question that I'm going to throw out there. I'm going to pin up here in the front, but to everybody, how do you manage expectations of supervisors versus realistic research outputs? I'm going to pin this one. And I'll restate. So how do we manage expectations that we get from our supervisors versus maybe what that means to us realistically?
Maybe I can jump in there.
Okay.
I actually do think that my supervisor is the one who's bringing me back to reality and sort of setting some realistic expectations for me, rather than, because sometimes you get lost in the what you want to do and how versus how you can actually do it within the restraints of the system and within the timelines and the deadlines that you have to work with. And I think I'm lucky enough that I have a supervisor who's sort of knocking some sense into me and saying, hey, maybe you need to take a little bit of time here. That way you can perform better once you're at the step of writing, or maybe you can take a little bit of time with the proposal, so that way once you're actually writing your thesis, you're kind of ready to embark on that journey. And it does help a lot with slowing me down, because also a lot of times I read so much and I'm so overwhelmed by the knowledge that I'm sort of exposed to, that I get lost. That having that conversation with a supervisor or with a colleague or someone in your committee sort of brings you back to a little bit of a center, where you're saying, okay, this is the work that I'm doing and this is how I'm choosing to be doing it. And when there's people to engage with, and that is very important.
Yeah. So I feel like that's very important, a point that you brought up, because I think it really depends on the dynamic that you have with your supervisor. Like they're like, as researchers, sometimes like you tend to be very ambitious, or sometimes you're a bit more like afraid of taking risks.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe having a supervisor that compliments you a little bit, like maybe like encourages you to take more risks, or rather like kind of gives you a bit more of like a reality check sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not possible.
Yeah, I think the question, it really depends, as you said, what is the dynamic with your supervisor? Are they the kind to ask you unrealistic things, or are they the kind that are more like down to earth? For me, like when you started reading the question, like the first part of the question made me think of the first couple months of my PhD, where I felt so overwhelmed and so like, I don't know, underperforming. I felt a lot of pressure. I was starting in a lab and I was going to be the one coordinating a big project. And I knew that, we had to start this project. It had been a while that, we had funding for that project, so it needed to be started. And I was responsible for getting it started and getting it like moving. So I felt a lot of pressure, but at the same time, when you're starting a PhD, like I had a course, I was a TA, I was, just getting set up, learning everything, basically. So I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, but I actually had this talk with my supervisor where I was like, can we talk? And she came, and then I was like, I kind of feel lost. I just want to know, like, what are your expectations of me right now? Like, this is what I'm doing. I'm, setting up my accounts at the Art Institute where we're conducting the research. I'm reading, I'm doing this. And she was like, yeah, that's it. Like, she was not expecting me to, be running experiments already. Like, she knows how it goes. She knows that there's some initial steps that you need to be making. So I realized that all this pressure, it was coming from myself. Like, it wasn't coming from her. So having that talk is really helpful. In the beginning, we kind of don't know how to, what's expected of us, and like a PhD doesn't have that much structure.
Yeah.
Like, we make it ourselves a structure, and we can do that along with our supervisors. So having these talks are super important.
Yeah.
Which is scary sometimes, right? The no structure thing. You get into it saying, oh, I have so much liberty, but then you kind of are confused about what to do with all of that. So it takes up a lot of yourself and everyone else around you to get to a space where you're saying, okay, this is how it works, and this is the actual sort of structure that works for me.
I agree with everything that's been said, and maybe the only thing I'll add to like your point, and I will also mention that I also consider myself lucky in the relationship with my supervisor, and on that point, I stress that it is a relationship. Like, you should treat your supervisor relationship as a human relationship, and like build that through communication and expectations, and have open talks with them. But one thing I want to add to that is that it's going to shift throughout the expectations and the nature of that communication throughout your PhD. Like, more often than not, early on in like your master's and you're early on in your graduate path, supervisors are likely going to be more hands-on and give you clear expectations and be like, this is what's expected, I need this, deadlines. And the more you move forward, the more that autonomy, you kind of grow into that self-autonomy, and the trust then builds throughout your relationship, and you kind of are setting those expectations for yourself and are more aware of what's realistic and what's expected, and they tend to kind of merge a bit more than
the beginning. Yeah.
that you might have in the beginning. So it really is a balancing act that likely shifts a lot throughout your path.
Yeah. And you're right, like you have to adjust. Like there's also been times where I was planning my comprehensive exam in the summer, and at the end of the summer, we said like I should publish a paper so that I could put that in my funding applications.
Yeah.
And then like at some point I realized, okay, this is too much. And I just told my supervisor, and she was like, okay, we'll do the comprehensive exam in the fall.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing to have with a supervisor, like, and life, like not just like your expectations of your work, but if something happens in your life and you can't meet those expectations, just being able to sit down with the supervisor and be like, listen, I'm having a rough time, I don't think I can work at the pace I'm working at, and then adjusting is something that I value in my relationship with my supervisor, and I would encourage you to look for in a relationship with a supervisor.
I think it comes down to communicating expectations on both ends
and boundaries,
and getting to
and
getting to like that's super important, because it's like you can have very understanding supervisors, and then you can have supervisors who are just look at you as like a paper machine, and like you can't possibly live like that. You really do need a balance, and it's important that you have boundaries and you communicate your expectations.
It can be difficult to set them, especially in the beginning, or especially if you're in a lab where people are working nonstop. But I think it's really important to set them.
Agreed.
So that they see you as a full-on human and not just as a graduate student, right?
Agreed.
Like it might be easier to say like, oh, I can't do this weekend because my family is gonna be there, as opposed to say like, I don't work on weekends, even though that's your actual boundary, but baby steps to get you there eventually.
Agreed. I'm going to move on to our next question we have from Anne, who says, thank you so much for doing this live. I was wondering if you were financially independent doing research, or if you had a job on the side, and how do you look for funds or get a salary? Is it a given? Big question. Big question, valid question, important question, because of the assumption that we're just supposed to not be paid.
And that's one of the biggest struggles, right? Is managing kind of finances, managing a job, and managing being a full-time student. It's just so difficult. And I think one of the biggest things that sort of either delay or gives you space to write, for example, it contributes greatly to how you are as a researcher and how you kind of see this as a career, right? So.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it also depends a lot on the university, the department, everything. So it's something very important to consider like when you are trying to start a PhD or you're thinking about starting, because it is, it's a big thing, honestly. And it also depends on your situation. Like if you have people who are dependent on you economically, or if you have to be have other responsibilities, like that's also something to consider. Ideally, try to find a university that accommodates that will give you a stipend. But more likely than not, you will have to try to find external funding as well. So apply to all of the opportunities that you see. Just apply to everything. Honestly, it helps. Even if it's a small grant or a small scholarship, it really it helps.
Absolutely.
And even if you don't get those grants and scholarships, it's very useful to go in that process, applying for things. It kind of makes it a bit clear to you what you're doing, what your work is. I mean, this is kind of what happened to me with the public scholars program, is that you're forced to sort of name what your research questions are. You're forced to name your research process. So it puts you in a space where you have a clearer map just because you found this opportunity out there that fits your profile and you said, hey, let me apply. So even if you don't end up getting that opportunity, I find it to be very useful.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Yeah, I would stress that as well. And beyond even just like you hear that a lot, apply, but I would add to that, invest in that application.
Yeah.
Invest your time, invest your energy, and invest like the quality of that application. And I'm speaking specifically of the government fundings, which are the bigger ones, SHRC and NSERC. Let me see. FRQSC
yeah.
and like the
CIHR and the federal
yes,
level.
all of these,
all those,
all of these big ones.
all those acronyms.
Yeah,
Which
like,
differ also requirements and eligibility from like international to local to
and
federal
even in
to
terms of like
provincial.
little tiny details of what that
Yes.
application, like it takes time, but it's, for me personally, was the most worthy investment of time. So if we speak from experience a bit, I left a career to come into grad school, and my kind of perspective going into it was like, I'm only going to go into grad school if I'm able to treat it as a career, as a job. I don't think I would have felt comfortable going into grad school unfunded, personally. So I made it a point to really put all my eggs in these funding applications and really giving it the best shot I could. And I was lucky that I got them. And to this day, I still treat grad school as a job. And being unfunded, like as soon as there's a period of time in my grad school process that's unfunded or has a potential of being unfunded, it's my first priority, like to get that settled, because then you're working for free and you shouldn't be. Like, I don't know if that's okay to say, but
because
yeah.
I agree, and I like what you said, that like you have to really treat it as like for me, like as a former athlete, I would treat it as a competition. Like I'm going to win something. But it wasn't always like that from the beginning. I remember the first applications I did, I just kind of like thought like, oh, this is so time consuming. Oh my god, it's annoying, and like I'll just get it if my transcript and whatever I did like is good enough. But I didn't really put that much like attention in the details and like really telling the story as it should. And like later on, like I guess I also was more realistic that I had a good chance, but I took it as like, I'm going to get it and I'm gonna really do everything I can so that it's the best application it can be. And there was some internal deadline in my research center where like I would submit it to them first, they would give me feedback, and then I would push it, and then so that it gives me also an earlier deadline so that you don't keep it to the day before. I really recommend that if you can find someone that will review it for you and give you a deadline that's like ahead of the real deadline, so that your application can be polished and not rushed last minute.
And you brought up something super important on the motivation, because I know some supervisors or departments where even if the student gets like a scholarship, their stipend will not change.
Right.
So that's like really another thing, because then like there's really not that motivation for you to take the time and like takes like a week for like a week of good work to like work on the application, and then if at the end you're not really getting like the money, it's really a bit discouraging. So definitely like have a talk with your department, with your supervisor on what are the expectations if you get funding, because that's important. Like I
wasn't aware of that.
Yes, it's that. So like Maxine said, like it's grad school, but really like it's a job. Like like we stopped taking classes a while ago. We're past that. It's really like a job. And so it's important that you get some that
clear expectations and communication with the
I think there are others that I cannot see.
They're right here if you want the questions from
From Sarah?
Oh, okay.
We also have a
Yeah, we do have some more.
Never mind. Okay, go ahead.
And if you do have more questions of funding, feel free to send us some follow-up ones. But we're gonna take a dramatic shift from finances to maybe something more personal. That was a very direct question that, in psychology at least, I hear a lot of. The question is, do you have imposter syndrome sometimes?
Oh my God, all the time. All the time. Yes. it's so difficult to navigate. It's really really a specific place or energy and kind of like thing to navigate. I think one of the biggest strategies that I've learned to deal with imposter syndrome is to surround myself with people who sort of lift me up in various ways, right? Whether it's people who do research that's similar to mine and can actually speak to some of the work that I do, or whether it's people who validate my experience doing a PhD or validate my experience being a Black woman in that space. I'm finding that it's very important to navigate. But I think imposter syndrome as a graduate student, as a PhD student, is perhaps inevitable. You know, I don't know if it's so easy to escape, but
I agree, especially some of the things that we were brought to do as public scholars was to, speak publicly about our research, and sometimes it was very hard to like picture myself as like, okay, you're gonna kind of be the expert on that topic and speak about this, and I'm like, well, there's people that know a lot more than me. Well, and you start doubting yourself, like, do I know enough to be speaking about this? So yeah, definitely it happens. The thing I try to tell myself is actually not a lot of scientists, not a lot of researchers do this type of outreach. A lot of people will just publish in scientific journals and it's going to stop there. So there's so much information that's not conveyed to the public. There's so much research, so much important knowledge that people don't know about simply because scientists don't do a lot of this knowledge dissemination. So even if I'm not the top expert on this field now, or maybe I'll never be, but I'm someone that's invested in doing this translation to the public, and that's important. So.
I have a bit of a different, I think I've grown into a different approach to imposter syndrome. And so in psychology, imposter syndrome really just reflects the fact that you don't feel like you belong or that you don't feel like you fit in. And a lot of times when you hear people say, oh, I suffer from imposter syndrome, the response is, no, you belong, you're fine. But I think there's some validity to imposter syndrome, not in the sense, hear me out, and not in the sense that you don't deserve to be there, that you don't have the skill or can develop the skill to be there. But I really do think that to a certain extent, it does reflect a truth in the sense that we still are in academia. A lot of people are still navigating a system where a lot of people don't feel like they belong. And that's where maybe that feeling is coming from. So accepting I don't see myself, I don't fit this mold. Okay, accept that for what it is, but not taking that as a reflection of your self-worth is to me the distance to take. So I think I'm able to say that no, I don't think I suffer from imposter syndrome anymore, or at least not in the sense of I don't think I'm good enough, and because I think we're all good enough. I really just think that maybe the way we're approaching what that feeling is might reveal something that's not about us. It's really about what we're navigating, what we're trying to be like. Are you trying to fit into a mold that you see in your field? And is that what's kind of triggering those feelings? If it is, then break that. Just follow your passion of research. If that's the reason you're there, and just lean into that. Whether that leads you to a public scholars program, whether that leads you towards industry, whether that leads you to setting a new standard for what it means to be a professor in field or whatever. So yeah, that's my take on imposter syndrome at the current moment.
Or about embracing your uniqueness and that you don't fit that mold, whatever. Well, like
I think so, or like even uniqueness is stress, but like just do what you're doing. Just do what you're doing and trust that you're learning through it and you're growing through it, and that you should right.
And not being in that mold can be an amazing thing for research,
Most
right? It can mean that you're thinking differently, that you're
Yeah.
bringing in another perspective that people that are typically in your field don't have because they have that tunnel vision.
Yeah.
I had like a hard time with imposter syndrome right when I started my program. It was like really bad. I think it got better like over time. I think it's also a lot of being compassionate like with yourself and with your own journey, because you're not gonna be like amazing at everything at first try. So it's just gonna be a learning curve, and you just have to be patient while you're going through it. And like you said, it's just like doing it and just getting rid of any expectations that you may have of the outcome. And I think that's very important, because like through your research, there's going to be things that won't work most of the time, and then you're going to have to be troubleshooting and you're going to have to try again. So something that my supervisor told me and that really stuck with me, and I'm trying to implement like every time like I'm working, is that you really have to separate yourself from the results that you get.
True.
Like if things don't work, that does not necessarily reflect bad on you. Like I'm the first to just like, if it doesn't work, oh, it was my fault. Like I did something wrong.
Yeah.
And it really
Like in your experiment,
Yes,
if you don't get the result,
exactly. If you don't see what it, or the result that you were, if it just your experiment doesn't work, then like try to separate yourself from the result. Like your self-worth does not depend on the outcome of your research. So just try your best, and I feel like everyone at some point or another will feel imposter syndrome. So it's a bit unavoidable, but just realize that if everyone feels that way, it's maybe because not everyone's
But exactly, if they're it's because the mold doesn't work anymore.
Exactly.
So like I can approach it,
And that environment is changing too. I
Yeah.
think like within academia and within higher education, there's a little bit more space for experimenting and failing, right? There's a little bit of more acceptance towards that, is that you try something, and if it doesn't work, as you said, it's not really a reflection on who you are as a researcher, as a person. It's just really not normal that things are working out all the time.
Yeah.
It's normal that things don't work out and something kind of leads you in another direction or kind of enlightens your ideas a little bit more, right? And that's sort of the beauty of what we were talking about, why we're doing this, the curiosity and the constantly learning. It's just scary sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It's super scary sometimes.
But like I really like that I think this also comes the longer you're the more you stay in grad school, the more you kind of feel, at least for me, I don't know if you share this feeling, but the beauty and the freedom of like accepting that you don't know anything. And that's great.
Totally,
Like, that's
it's a
actually great.
humbling
Like you should let go of those.
It's like liberating.
Those
very.
feelings of the beginning of being like, oh, I need to know anything and I'm not good enough. I'm not an expert. But like I think being an expert actually implies the fact that you don't know everything about a thing, because you're gonna have to keep learning. So like a freedom and the beauty in that freedom of just accepting, you don't know anything, no one knows anything, and you're just gonna keep learning. But that's the beauty of it. Thanks for that question.
I think there was a question on the
On
the chat.
So it's what strategies do you use to engage with the public or non-specialist audiences with your research, and why do you think public engagement is important to your field? So like during your public scholarship, like strategies have you been able to come up with or have been learning the process to engage with wider audiences?
I can start. So one of the first things that we learned to do is how to write what's called an op-ed or an opinion piece. And that's a way that I found myself to really like. I always enjoyed writing, so it was a really good outlet. So essentially, it's just to write an article. It takes way less time than writing a scientific paper, and it has a much wider reach. So it's just about stating like what your opinion is, but an informed opinion. So informed on the knowledge that you have from your research. And that's a really good way to sort of get a foot in, because like as researchers, we have quite a bit of credibility, right? In the fact that we're researching a specific field. So if you come up with an article saying, I research this field and I have an opinion on this topic, your credibility is good. So you have a good chance to get it published and to have a wide audience read it. And then from that, there are some opportunities media can come up, like radio interview or different type of interviews. And and if people don't reach out to you, you can still be like here's my piece that I wrote on this topic, and it's a good way to show what you've contributed. What else have we used? Like videos that we produced through the program, like short videos introducing our research. A public event also, and it was very different. Like my event from Maxine's, it was very different. Mine was like a panel discussion where I had researchers in the field talk about dementia prevention. Maxine was more of a conversation on gender stereotypes. Correct. I was like, that was gender, it was stereotypes. So yeah, that was a public an event that was open to the public and live streamed and recorded, like making it even more accessible. So some of the things that we did, some examples.
Yeah. And I think for the events too, we had the opportunity to collaborate with people from outside of our sort of circles or academic circles, which was the cool thing about it, is that we had the opportunity to bring in whoever we wanted to and to engage in conversation with whoever we wanted to as well. And that was the freedom that was allowed to us by that sort of the structure of event. But it also kind of pushes you to also disseminate your work beyond those confines of formal educational institutions. Yes, we all at the fourth space, but we were able to engage in conversation with a number of other people from community, right? So that speaks a lot to what we're willing to do as researchers and as academics and scholars. And also that sort of speaks to this move towards engaging with the wider public, right? Beyond like the confines of academia. So
it's also really good networking opportunities to just finding the speakers, finding the people you want to bring in as audience members. You have to what are the networks involved in my field, or the people that have these kind of influential views on my topic that I want to bring in. So and then you have to reach out to these people, invite them, connect with them. So that was also really great.
And like I think that networking in and of itself, to me, is something that unexpectedly was like a big way to see the trickling effects of the knowledge dissemination. Like just a one-on-one conversation with someone who happened to be there or here or read this little piece, just reached out. Just a one-on-one conversations there, then just trickled beyond what like a point in time, like an op-ed, which I loved, and I truly enjoyed the experience of writing op-eds. But it's the fact that it goes beyond that, even if it just comes down to like talking to one person and getting them to ask a question, and that leading to another connection, and those connections all kind of thinking about things or providing perspectives on just one same thing. Just maybe to further the op-ed thing, I do truly think that it's a really cool way to comment on something that's really relevant and accessible for a lot of people from a perspective of research. So like you mentioned, I do research on gender stereotypes. And over the last year, for example, there's been a lot of controversies around gender in the news, and being able to reach out from academia and kind of just write something in the aim of touching someone in the public, or to just transmit or open a conversation beyond the academic walls, I think is the power of like that bridge between academia and everybody. Everybody really. Yeah.
And like maybe like leading to policy change. And I know like sometimes it can be crazy to think like, okay, like, you know, my op-ed is not gonna change political decisions, but like what we have to realize is also that political decisions are based on what is considered popular opinion, and for opinions to become popular, we need to start by convincing people around us, convincing people in just the general public. So.
Yeah. And that's super important because my event's it's gonna be next month, so I'm very excited about that. And the whole idea is just to make I study antimicrobial resistance, and I really think it's something that everyone should know about. I just feel like I want to go out on the street and start screaming it because I do want people to know that, and I think it's important that I'm sure you feel the same way about your research topics. If it's something that you're willing to invest 4+ years of your life in, then I'm sure it's something that you're passionate about, something that concerns you, and it's it's important that we put the word out there and for whoever wants to listen. And some of the idea of my event is just to make it more accessible for the general public as well. So I'm having some experts talk about it. I'm gonna ask some questions, and I think that also comes with its own difficulties. I feel like sometimes trying to engage the general audience and making it more accessible and engaging for them is a bit difficult, and it's something I've been really enjoying about the Public Scholars program, because it really forces you to try to stay away from the jargon and try to make the idea easily understandable for people who might not have who will have different backgrounds. And something very important that was taught to us during one of the multiple trainings that we had was that it's really when you try to do that, it's there's really not such a thing as dumbing something down. It's really you just have to be mindful that people are experts in different things, and they might not be I feel like us as PhD students, we're all the time surrounded by people who are very well versed in what we do and are very knowledgeable. So you just assume that everyone knows what you do, but it's very difficult to actually I don't know, try to explain what I do to my mom. It's very difficult. So it's a very, very nice skill to have. It's been very, very interesting, and I think it's helped me also think of my research in a different way and give me more motivation and more of a I really liked it.
Do we have more questions on Instagram? We have some more on YouTube.
I'm not sure what that button is. I'm just gonna go check because there's something right there.
We do have more on YouTube. We could swap back here. I think maybe there's two that are quite related. So I might start with that. How much free time and workload do you have? And maybe relatedly, what are perhaps some frustrations or surprises you've come across going into research? And so, they're somewhat related. I think one touches on time, work-life balance, which I think is something that we all are quite passionate about.
Yes.
And maybe within there, how do you manage frustrations and surprises throughout? Feel we could talk about them separately, but I did see a potential link between them.
Yeah.
But work-life balance.
For me, I feel like work hours, or rather I should say, I feel like work can expand or contract depending on how much time you allocate to it. So if you give yourself I'm gonna work 10, 12 hours today, you're gonna stretch the work you have to do and just take more time to do it. This is how I feel. I don't think you're gonna be twice as more productive as if you did 6 hours. I don't think the human brain can function effectively for that long and really be productive for that long. I think we need the breaks. Our brain needs some transition time, getting up, walk a little bit, you keep thinking about what you're doing. Maybe you get a new idea, you see differently, you go back to sit at your computer, but really I have a problem with the overwork culture of academia. I really think we need to have work-life balance and having healthy work hours. and have that pretty strict, like impose ourselves like a normal schedule and just do that. And I mean, of course, there's exceptions. There's like, if the deadline is tomorrow, yeah, probably work in the evening. But to me, that's an exception. It's not the rule. Like, that's where I really draw the line. Every day, almost, not tonight, I do a training. And to me, that's just like the normal thing. It's like, it's like brushing my teeth. I brush my teeth every day. I train every day. To me, it's just my normal thing to do. Even if I'm really busy with work, I'm still gonna do my training again, unless the deadline is tomorrow and I really have something to finish. But it's the exception. So to me, that's super important.
Yeah, I think it's really important because it happens to me all the time too. Like if I say I'm gonna give myself this much time, the work just expands to whatever time I give it to. And yeah, I think it's very important to just have a life outside of your project because it can be very consuming. But like I completely agree, just having other interests and like doing something else really will help you. Like when there was a question about frustration, that really helps you with frustration. Like when nothing is working, you really need somewhere to escape, somewhere else to be. So it's really important that you
when your statistical analysis not working, just keep doing it. It's not gonna help. You need to go out, go for a run, or do whatever makes you feel good.
Yeah, exactly.
Go back to it later.
Or you could try like be debugging your code for like 35 minutes, or instead go for a 20-minute walk. And I'm sure like sometimes like the answer just comes to you, and you come back and it's silent. So it's important to
computers.
Yeah, it's really, really important. And I think you mentioned something super important. I'm sure you know about it because like your op-ed and your research really like talks a lot about that as well. But like physical exercise is very, very important, that you have something that keeps you active as well. Like I wish I could say that I do like a strict 9 to 5. I do not. Like I'm very like it really does change a lot my schedule, but I do try to like do something else. Like sometimes in between incubations, I'll go to the gym and then come back to the lab, or like spending time with your friends, calling your family. Like that's the kind of thing that really pushes you forward, and that helps you when you're getting stuck. So when things are working, like that's really what's gonna help you like move past that. So it's important that you don't just focus on your work and like work all day, because it's gonna affect your productivity, your mental health, your everything. So it's important to have that balance. Really, really important.
I think I'd speak a little bit also to some of the frustrations, or the biggest frustration for me is not really meeting deadlines, right? And that's kind of one of the biggest issues for me, is that I had anticipated that I would finish the program by a given time, but amidst all of it, I kind of like pushed it a little bit. But I've just come to that acceptance that that's all right. That's completely okay. That deadlines can change, and things are a little bit flexible. And if need be, that things might need to be changed around a little bit to accommodate for life that we were talking about, because life keeps happening, right? It's been the biggest frustrations, but also the biggest lessons in patience for me, is that I have to be patient. I'm doing my work, but at the same time, I have to be patient that things will fall into place with whatever structure it is that I'm creating for myself. So
I don't have much to add except like maybe if we touch back on the 9 to 5, a pro of the context we're in, like the I think is that it does allow for that flexibility, and it's something that I truly like appreciate of academia. I can't do 9 to 5. I've tried the structuring it like that, and I can't. Like I don't like it. But there is that flexibility. Like, I'm gonna start later and just finish later, or like make these random hours, as long as like I'm managing my time for a way that suits me. I really appreciate that flexibility, and it's something that I'm like has weighed a lot in my decision of like transitioning out of academia or staying within it. I had a point that this led to that now I lost, but but I think I got it back. So I think for me it does come down to understanding that it is a skill. Like time management is a skill that you have to practice and develop and get better at. And so like that whole 9 to 5 thing, it works for some better than it does for others, but you can like adapt in a way or find things that work for you to make your time work more efficiently. But I agree with everything Belle said, and this like implied expectation that you hear of a lot of like people who are overworking themselves, and it's kind of like tied to a pride almost of like, oh,
Yep.
I did 50 hours. Like, no, I
That's the
don't
frustration.
want that. I don't want that for myself. It's like,
Bit of a badge of honor in
Yeah,
academia.
yeah.
Like, I'm so tired.
I know.
and I don't know if I don't have time to eat.
yeah, no.
It's
Those are
not-
all
it's
red
not
flags.
cool.
Those are all red flags. And I think it does come back to the whole idea of like treating it as a job. So ultimately, whether you stay in academia or not, your grad experience should prepare you for a career, regardless of that is. So if you spend your time in grad working 25 hours a day, and then you're going to transition so like beyond that, and you don't have this, you didn't work to develop the skills of managing your time and implementing a work-life balance, you're going to be left very lost afterwards.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And I guess some people see this the PhD as a very high performance thing,
Yeah.
and not just like your regular job that you just punch in and punch out. But I would add, and that's something that really shocked me when I came from competitive judo, and I retired from that and I started my PhD shortly after, and I was like, whoa, this is the culture I'm in now. And how in high level sport it's such a accepted fact, like it's very just normal to, yeah, you train hard, but then you also have to rest and recover, right? And that's just the normal thing to do. Like, no one is gonna go bragging like, I trained for 10 hours today and I didn't sleep. You know, like, it seems a bit stupid to say, but it's just the recovery aspect is like very important in sport, and I think it also should be in academia. Our brain needs sleep to function well the next day. It needs good nutrition, and we know all this, especially in our field. Like, we're in health, we know what's good for her brain, we know what's good for her body, but like a lot of researchers don't do it. So for me, like trying to keep having that balance and understanding that I need to have that balance in my life to keep performing well and also be happy, which is also important. Has been helpful.
Anything else in work-life balance? Yes, we had a lot to say on work-life balance. Another question I have here is, do you get, this is more of a technicality of, I think, how the program works. Do you get into your PhD with a pre-established research question, or is that something that you find over time or through the program?
I got into the PhD with a relatively different focus. While I didn't necessarily completely move away from it, it's still within my discipline. And in my general kind of research area, I think I still moved in a different direction. And I'm glad I had the space to do that, because that's the point of why I'm doing this. Yes, I want to finish my degree, but at the same time, I also want to do the research that matters to me personally and kind of something that drives me. So I think there is the flexibility of also choosing something else if you were to stay within your discipline and to move into a bit of a different direction. But at the same time, you kind of, perhaps depending on the program, you get into a PhD sort of with a general understanding of what you want to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say general. For me, it was, of course, I knew generally what is the lab doing and what I would be focusing on, but there's been a lot of changes in my actual research question over the years. So I thought, like, this is going to be my one project and that's it. But it was, I ended up working on multiple projects. So yeah, things really change a lot throughout.
And I think this is something that varies a lot, probably across fields, but I can't speak much to fields, but at least just even interdisciplinary through across labs or across supervisors. I know people who went into a lab with a research question already pretty much established. Like this is what this is a topic. This is a research question where the lab is looking to answer right now. Is this something you're interested in to take on as PhD work? Myself, it was quite different from that. So I did the master's PhD like in psychology. It's pretty expected that they one follows the other. I went to the master's approaching one research question, but it was like I knew going into it that I wanted to study gender and gender stereotypes. It wasn't a topic that was prevalent much in the lab, but I had a pretty good relationship with my now supervisor that opened up a lot of communications, being like, this is the kind of research I'm interested in and to do for PhD work. Is this something you'd be open to having as a research topic in the lab? And we eventually came to a place that we agreed upon a research question that met both of our needs. And before entering the PhD program per se, like before entering the master's to the PhD, that was confirmed. So I knew going into it what I would be doing from the master's to the PhD. But yeah, I think it varies.
Yeah, I think for me it also was a bit of a change. It depends as well. Like in my field, usually, like either the student comes with a proposal, as in like this is what I would like to be researching in, or the lab just it's like this is a question that we have. We can give you this project. For me, it was the latter. So I was offered a project. Well, actually, like a couple of options of projects, or like to come up with my own. And I already knew the lab, I already knew the supervisor, I already knew that I was very interested in like one particular question. And I started with that one. And then as the years went by and like, it definitely changed through this time. So like right now it's a different project from the one that I started with. But something else that I really liked is that as you're going, you can kind of like tailor the project to what you want to do after. So at the end of the day, like the important part is also that you build the skills that you think that you're gonna need after you graduate. So like right now, I'm like trying to tailor my project to give me the tools that I'm gonna like that I want to get in order to maybe find a job later on, and things that I want to learn how to do before I graduate. So it also gives you that kind of flexibility.
So the answer is that it's diverse.
Right?
Like it really changes.
Depends.
It depends on who you're working with and where you are, and that's sort of the best thing about being in a PhD program, yet the scariest thing, the flexibility, right? And how to manage that flexibility. It can be incredible, but can also be very overwhelming.
Yeah, because it really allows to follow your interests. And I realized when I started my PhD, I didn't know what I would end up being passionate about. Like I was just kind of like, the brain is cool and brain imaging is fun. Like in the beginning, I'm exaggerating slightly, but it's throughout my PhD that I discovered that I was really interested in dementia prevention, and that like slowly I started focusing more my work towards that. So that was like a really nice way to explore and get to know what I'm interested in, and then refine my topic to meet those interests. So that's a really a big advantage of the flexibility that we get.
Well, I think we've exhausted the questions on YouTube. How is Instagram working?
Died for a while, so I think as well.
It's done, or it's
Yeah, it finished at some point, so I started.
Kiki, like it was for an hour.
Oh,
Okay. But yeah, on that same like note for the flexibility, like I don't know if it's like a good thing or a bad thing, but for me it was very difficult because I was coming directly from undergrad, and I'm like someone who really just procrastinated until the last moment. So I was a typical student who would just like not sleep one night before the exams or before the paper was due or whatever, just like doing it and finishing it. So it was really a big adjustment for me coming to the PhD when there was like no deadlines. So I just It was very difficult
Yeah.
because then I learned like it took me a while, but I learned like it's really like you just have to set your own deadlines, you have to set your own schedule and manage your time. So it was a bit of a learning process, and but it's like something that you just have to do. You have to learn what you like, what you have to learn the way that you work and how you work best, and
The lack of structure has been like a really tough one for me too, and so you really have to find what works for you and make that structure for yourself.
It's important.
So,
Well, on that note, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to put them in. Maybe to close off, is there a piece of advice or wisdom that we would give to people as we're approach the seniority of our PhD process, to get closer to the end of the PhD process? Is there something you would like someone to have told you early on in your graduate experience, be it master's, PhD, or even undergrad?
I think like something that I wish someone told me was to just like do not like ever compare yourself to other people, because that just leads to nothing good. Like
Yes.
like even us, like we've had like our own journey and our paths that led us here to be sitting on this couch have been completely different, and there's no point in just comparing yourself. Like it's you might be in the same program, you might be in the same lab, you might be whatever, but what you feel and yourself is very different from what they know and what they've experienced. So just like try to like make the most out of your program and learn as much as you can and enjoy and cry and write and whatever, like
Cry.
but just like don't compare yourself to other people. Like whatever happens, like however long it takes you, just enjoy it. Like
it's really okay.
just like make the most out of it and don't think of
I second that advice. I would have liked to hear that advice too, honestly. I
love that. It was really pretty. That was really beautiful to hear.
I would also add that don't focus too much on productivity, especially in the beginning. I would focus a lot on that. But there's some days in your grad school life where your work day is gonna be like reading a bunch of papers. So you finish your day and you're like, I didn't do anything, I didn't write anything, I didn't produce anything. But rather than focusing on productivity, try to focus on the learning process. That's way more rewarding. And well, that's what grad life is about. Like it's about learning, it's about exploring, and try to follow your interests and be curious.
I'd probably add to that. Like I wish someone would, and something I'm discovering, like, or at least emphasizing in the public scholars program, and right a little before that, which led me to come to the public scholars program, but really that a PhD or grad experience is really more than just like your thesis. Yes, you're gonna spend a big chunk of your time like working on that thesis or that research question or whatever, but really it's an opportunity for you to just try things and to develop skills, whether that be presentation skills, networking skills, like get in touch with universities, see what opportunities are out there. Like just over the last year, I realized that there's things happening at the university that I have access to that I was like, oh, a green room? Cool. But just make space within your grad experience to develop like yourself, like to grow yourself as an individual and develop skills that might not seem intuitively related to research, but that you'll be happy to have explored in this lower stakes environment than your career afterwards, kind of thing.
That's super important, because I feel like it's those small risks that you take or those small opportunities that you take that can really lead you to very unexpected things. Like maybe you apply to this public scholars and you realize that you really like writing, and then you really go into like scientific writing or like so like it's really like maybe those other opportunities that you take that might lead you to unexpected places that you might not have access to otherwise.
100%.
Yeah, I think taking on all those opportunities is really important because if you're too focused on your PhD, like you're gonna finish and you're gonna kind of, okay, now what? You know?
Which you still might have,
Yeah.
just so you all are aware.
Yeah, you still might have it. So it's not a given that it will be super smooth and you will land a job the next day. But if you kind of follow your interests, take on those extra opportunities that are a bit outside of your research. I don't see these as like a waste of time because it's not working towards your thesis. See this as an investment towards your potential career as a way to explore what else is out there and to develop other skills that will be helpful for your career afterwards. And it's also helpful for your research because if you're learning, I don't know, science communication skills, you'll be able to be a better presenter at scientific conference. You'll be probably better able to secure funding because to get funding, you need to be able to explain to someone who's not an expert why your work is cool. So
But I think it also has to be a balanced approach because sometimes we say yes a little too much and it becomes very overwhelming. So the idea here is to be balanced with how much commitment you put into your thesis and how much commitment you give into other opportunities or what you might want to take on. But the idea is to be balanced with it. That way
That's
it kind of,
selective, yeah.
exactly, it's very selective, right? So as to not overwhelm yourselves because again, life keeps happening and you kind of need to pick what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
definitely. I think I used to say yes a bit too much.
Yeah.
And
You learn it.
not
as you
that I'm
get
much
into it.
better, but at least I find that in the last years where it's clearer what I want to do next, I can at least say yes to opportunities that align with that and no to the rest. As opposed to in the beginning, I was more in exploration mode and I didn't really know. So, machine learning, maybe.
Yes.
This.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I can be more focused in what I say yes to. Yeah, it's definitely important to not overwhelm yourself.
Well, on that note,
Awesome.
thank you all for joining and for the questions. I believe the live stream is going to be posted on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with us. And if you have follow-ups, reach out. Start a conversation. We'd be happy to engage. But thanks for joining us tonight. It was fun. This was nice. It was nice.
Yeah.
And have a good night, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.